Look what you got in the background.
Yes.
I love that painting
Yes.
so much. And you look,
I
look,
have
look,
a
look at your colors. Look at your colors, what you're
I
wearing.
have a painting that you gave me, Getty, that I love so much and that I could sort of look at endlessly. So I thought it would be wonderful to accompany us here in
Oh,
this conversation,
oh, that's wonderful. I love it. I love it.
right?
I love that painting so much.
It's
And I
good,
remember
right?
what you said to me when you got the painting, because that's when you told me about your father's project and what you were working on and how it made so much, it resonated with you. I,
Absolutely, because this painting has Vive la joie is one of its signposts, which I feel like is sort of like your movie, um, which is Ayiti Mon Amour. Which, I always think like the title of a film sets all of us up to encounter it.
yeah, yeah.
And you did it from jump with this. Um, Haiti, you are my love, but it's also like talking to, not
Yeah.
not just talking about, but talking to. So that's where I sort of wanted to start. It's like it's all in the title, right? It's there. The Creole is there. The place is there. The love is there, and the my is there. Um, and so I love this film, and I was thinking about it a lot after rewatching it. I thought about it a lot when I saw it for the first time, and it's just this sort of gorgeous network of relationships happening on their own terms and in their own time. And the other thing about it for me, and this is, you and I share the fact that you um, brought me to Haiti with you on a trip where we spent time mostly in Cap Haitien, and I was immediately transported by your movie um, to the beach, to the island, and so that was the other word. So the words that came to mind for me when thinking about your film was like relationships and like transportive. So you know, I felt transported to a place by the rhythm of the movie, by the love in the movie, by the visuals, by the music. So I know that it is a place for you of many complicated things,
Mhm.
much love, like love is always complicated. But how much in your relationship to understanding cinema and the ways it can transport us, how much did you think of this movie as almost like a spaceship that would take us to an island where we could be on an island with you?
Thank you for your observations, darling. I mean, when you say transport, I think of portals, right? And I don't make my films with agenda, but this one in particular, the main agenda was to put Haiti in conversation with the outside world, but Haiti dictating that conversation, dictating the
Mm,
subject of the conversation.
mm,
Because we're always talking about the place, but we don't really know the place. Do we? We don't really see the place. And it was the seeing that I was like most fascinated with in going out to make this film. It's like, how do I get others to see us in the way we see ourselves? And how do I get us to see ourselves also differently? Because, it's like this, because it's a country that's always under somebody else's gaze. And the gaze is very myopic. It's either, we're talking about disasters of biblical proportion, or, like political unrest, or, people are fascinated with voodoo, but there's always like, but that in between is never seen. And so for me, it was, yeah, the transportation to a place. And one thing that I also say when I begin, when I introduce the film, and that's why I insisted on being there like all the time to like, show the film, was forget everything that you know about this place. everything that you think you know about this place, and just let yourself journey through this. Like, let it lull you. I saw it as a kind of like, sort of like a berceuse, you know, like a lullaby into a place that means like so much to me. I always say that, like, you know, it's a place that I'm like passionate about, that it's like that kind of like relationship with someone that you're passionate about, but you're not getting it back that same way. Yeah, so for me, that was that. It was like that transportation of taking us to the space and seeing it differently, was the guiding thread for me throughout this process.
Mm, mm. Well, and you know, when you say that about like rocking you, the berceuse, it's also the motion of the sea, that is both, you know, gentle and violent motion. Um, but what I found so utterly unique about your film, Guetty, was that you, yes, we are looking at things, but we are in things. Like I literally felt like I could feel my feet standing on the beach. I could feel the quality of the rocks and the shells on the beach. And you know, the movie starts that way. You immerse us literally. We are underwater, and we're in an unfamiliar underwater, but um, an underwater that's it feels okay to be in it. It feels more than okay. It feels good. But there's some strange things there that we haven't seen before. And, you know, obviously, this film is speaking in relation to the earthquake, but in such a radically different way. And I was just stunned by the power of the scenes in which we see the clothes floating in the ocean and how much dimensionality that had. You know, it's about so many things, and yet it's doing it in this incredibly gentle way. So you have three sets of relationships going on in this film: a mother and a son. Uh, do you say a muse and a writer? What do you say to
I,
describe?
yeah, the muse and the writer. Yeah.
Yeah, a muse and a writer, but I feel like it's more complicated and interesting than that.
Yeah.
Um, and a husband and a wife, and you have generational cross. You know, all these things are going on. But wow, you are not literal about anything, which I think is also like the boldness of this film, that that is on your own terms. So that not only is, you know, I think you're saying my Haiti is unfamiliar to other people. You're also saying my cinema is unfamiliar to other people, and I would like to do this on my terms. So, can you talk about your resistance to literalism?
Well, I never got that question before, but I definitely know how to answer it. um, you know, this movie was born out of a place of like utter frustration on many levels. I was in this kind of like development hell, in doing the film that I'm about to do now. And it was either, you know, like, all right, just like go under my covers and never come out for a couple of weeks, but that's not my personality. Or I go rogue and do something that I want to do at the moment. And I was watching, actually the impetus for it came from watching Abdurrahman Sissako when he was showing Timbuktu in Cannes. And of course, I couldn't be in Cannes. So I watched like all the press, you know, like stuff and everything. And he said two things. He said, one cannot call ourselves filmmakers if we're not making stuff. We got to be making films. We got to be like, you know, in complete interaction with like the medium constantly. Either we're working with other people making the films, but you know, but we have to constantly, or else we become like, you know, petrified, or we get lazy and we do nothing, right? And another thing he says also, we have to go and make cinema in places where people are not expecting cinema to be. And I was like, okay, all right, let's just simplify this like thing because I had like, I had written this project like right after the quake, on the heels of the quake. And of course, it was going to be like this an anthological film with different filmmakers and so on and so forth. And then Haiti was no longer à la mode, like we were no longer in vogue because our disaster had become someone else's, like business. And there were other disasters to tend to, and no one wanted to touch it. And so I said, okay, let me just like bring this down to something that's containable, that I can make, that's going to be on my own terms. And I'm going to go completely rogue. I'm not going to ask anybody for permission or try to like bring it to different commission and get the money. I just looked around me and said, okay, who are my people? Who will, like support me no matter what, to make this tiny little film that's like, like wants to be born, right? And so I did. That's what I did with the words of Abdurrahman. And one third thing he said, also, you must trust in the magic of cinema. And that I will learn later on. And I'll tell you like the anecdote of the magic of cinema. And so I was just like, I got enough here, let's go. And so, and that was it. And it was going to be on my own terms because, not because I decided, like I'm going to try to like, be fancy or try to find like, something that people have never seen before. It's because I think also, stories dictate our forms, right? And I wanted to be intergenerational. I wanted to be about like healing, specifically healing. I wanted it to be about love. And for me, like the scene where Jaurès and Odessa are dancing, that was like in my head even before like I wrote it down on paper, right? And so for me, and it was also going to take place in a community that I know that people love me and they trust me and I love them and I trust them. So and our Indiegogo campaign was, it takes a village to make a film, and that's what it was actually. It's because, and people, like the moment that I got there and I said I'm going to make this movie, people just like, we're down, okay, whatever. And I was just like, okay, all right, this is it. This is where this movie is going to exist, and it's going to be contained in one place, because you got to cut your cloth, right? I didn't have the funds to go do like this movie on like 3 different continents, but I did have like, the energy and the manpower and the people and a little bit of funding to make it in that one space. So that space really dictated what the whole form was going to be about as well. I don't know if I answered your question
Oh,
though.
yes, you did. And I, I was going to ask you earlier, one of the questions I had was like, how did you give yourself permission to make this movie? Which is what you just answered. And I think it's so interesting, and I think I can speak this from my own self, and you and I share it and know it. There's a way in which, when the kind of work that we wish to see in the world doesn't yet exist, when we're doing and making things, we think about them as small, because they're unfamiliar and often they're underfinanced, and we've tried to get them financed. We've tried to share our vision with a lot of people, and they'll say, I don't understand, I don't see it, because the language has not yet been created. But I love learning that Abdurrahman Sissoko and Timbuktu was a touchstone for you. And it was so amazing when you said his name and the name of his film. I could feel the heat of the place in that movie.
Yeah.
And that's the you can feel your movie. People touch people, and they don't just touch people in expected way. Your like electricity is passing through people in your movie, which I just find so thrilling. I can't even tell you. I've been doing that with my kids now. I walk and I go like they're giving me energy. So when you've entered the lexicon of our family household.
Thank
And
you.
I mean, that's what this is about, right? Like, how do we share these delights with each other? And that's what you did in this movie. And I love learning what you're saying about the village of people who supported you financially, but obviously this particular place, this small place, where you all sort of moved in. The
Mhm.
team moved in with the camera, with the sound operators, and you watched the light and you found the moments to shoot in the place. So tell us all, like, how long did you stay? 'Cause how did you go from words, then words plus money, to being in a place with gear and people? Like, tell us about the rhythm of a day, or how long you worked on this film there.
Okay, so this is, so this is a family affair. This is the only kind of like affair that you can do like with your family, because you can bribe, you can, Joaquin, for example, who plays Orphée in the film, it's like that was the gift to me, but he was like, that's your birthday gift, that's a Mother's Day gift, and that's a Christmas gift.
Oh, I love it. And you asked him, or did he say, "Hey, mom, I'd like to be in your movie"?
Well, actually, the way that it happened was because, when I write, I do ask, like, what do you think about this? And I was writing, and the character was like, was inspired by him. And
Mhm.
he was, at the time, he was a year prior to that, he was teaching himself Japanese. And
Oh,
yeah,
I
and
wondered about that.
yeah, he was
Yeah.
teaching himself Japanese, and he would come to me and he'd like say words in Japanese, and I'd be like, what does that one mean? And he was just like, he'd say that. And I would say, what does that sound like, like authentic to you, like this, these words, like a teenager and everything? And he was just like, yeah, okay, yeah, but I think I would say this like this, and 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 so that specific role. So when I went out to cast that role, because I started the film in 2014, because we were in Haiti with Hervé, doing a series of portraits of artists for a big exhibition that was going to happen in Paris. And so we were the ones who were contracted to do these videos where we filmed a whole bunch of like famous artists in Haiti. And so while we were there, so we extended our stay so we can start shooting Ayiti Mon Amour. So we started with the first story. So it was made in pieces. So we
Mm.
started with the first story, which was Jaurès and Odessa's story. So and I had not cast Orphée yet. And Jojo was supposed to come with us that summer, but decided that he was going to go, on a trip to Europe with his friends. It was like he had graduated high school, and so he was going to go on a trip to Europe with his friends. So we cast a couple of like people, but it was a tall order because I wanted someone who can speak English, who can speak French, but who can speak Japanese.
They're all over the place.
Yeah, exactly. And then but I thought, the Japanese, we could work on the accent, da da da, and so on and so forth. But I needed the English because he's this, kid, who's like multicultural or whatever, but he's kind of like awkward teenager vibe. And couldn't find anyone. And I was just like, why am I making this so difficult? Right. But I wanted to shoot that part like there that summer too. So I said, okay, all right, I'll deal with what I have here. I'll continue casting that, but we'll shoot the that story. And that this is a place that we lived with our kids for 2 years, so we know this place. I mean, like, this is like the house that I live in is still called Kaigeti. Although now it's been torn down and it's a hotel, but people like called it for the longest time Kaigeti, and now they're like, yeah, like where Guetty used to live. That hotel was like, where Guetty used to.
It
So
will always be where Getty used to
exactly.
live.
Exactly. So it was seamless for us to just go there and make this film. So we shot the first one in 2014, and then we did our Indiegogo campaign, and then went in January of 2015. By that time, JoJo was available, and I was just like, okay, sir, it's all yours.
Gotta
And
work with the divas.
yeah, and so this is freshman in college, but he only had like 2 weeks to give us. So, and then Anisha came down, and Anisha, like had been to Haiti the year prior. And it was like my whole thing, we would joke around like, I'm gonna make you Haitian. You're gonna be in a movie where you play, someone who's Haitian. But then it turned out like she's playing someone we don't know what the nationality is, right? So we, you know, and Anicia came down, so we shot like the part of Anicia and Jojo together, and then Jojo would come like the following. He came he came again in during spring break, and we shot that part with Simbi, with the girl on the boat at the end.
Yes.
So and she and Jojo knew each other when they were little. And
Oh.
Jojo couldn't stand her because she was just too much for him. And he was just this shy little kid. And he'd be like, and she would be like, and she was just like, she's just this lovely little girl, but it was just like too much. It was like, I don't know. When she would come, like he'd go and hide because she was just too much. And 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 I didn't tell Jojo that Simbi was the one who was going to play that part. So they just like, they
Oh.
had not seen each other like in 12 years.
Mm.
And so like they rediscovered each other there, and they got along really like very, very well. So I sort of like worked on that, their energy
Oh,
and their
Guetty,
rapport.
it's so wonderful that you share this chronology with us, and I think like once again you're empowering to all the rest of us. It's like, no, you don't have all of the ideas, all of the money, all of the scenes shot. You actually like allowed time to be an element in how this film got made.
Yeah.
And we were talking earlier about Jores, whose face is, sort of a landscape of beauty and kindness unto itself. You just see his face and it's all there. But I was so interested in like how you met him, developed that relationship with him, and what he brought to the film, because it felt like he brought his deep knowledge of place, his experience of seeing the place change, the loss of the fish, the arrival of all of that stuff on the beach, choking the beach and the ocean. And this incredible moment of the funeral ritual between all of the fishermen is just, I mean, I felt so honored to be there, to see that. So, talk about your relationship to him. Talk about how those moments emerged with him, how much, the ways in which he collaborated with you, because it's so clear he was a collaborator in the writing of the film.
That's so beautiful that you saw the funeral ritual, because sometimes people didn't get it, like that it's a funeral ritual. And that's so beautiful that you got that. So with Jaurès, of course, I've known him, since 2003 when we moved to Jacmel in that region. So first we lived in a beach called Timouillage, and then we moved to Cabik on another beach. So we stayed 2 years. And so, and this is someone who always, came around, like who sold his fish. And I just loved his face. And I like the first day I met him, I was just like, I want to put this man in a movie because I love
Amazing
him
face.
so much, I love this face so much. But he is who he is in the film as well. So it was like all his knowledge that I just wanted to encapsulate and share with not just the world, but I wanted to share it first with the people like in the village, all that knowledge. And then I wanted to share with the rest of Haiti. And then I wanted to share it with the world, because sometimes there are people like around you, but you take for granted because no one asked them about their knowledge. And here I am, I'm coming in, I was like, give me everything you know about this space of like what was, like happening. And he just like sat me down as though he were, like a griot telling me a story, and just told me stories. And so I was inspired by those stories. And of course, the storyteller became, part of the film as well. It made organic sense. And that's the way that I work as well.
Yes.
And of course, if you have Jaurès, and he's sort of like, like he's like a statesman, like in the village where he lives, which is a village just next door to the village where, we shot the film. And so he just like, we had a meeting with all the other fishermen. And I said, what should I do, like when I invite the other fishermen to have this meeting, because I wanted to be like, that was like my Visconti moment that I called it, where where they sat on the boat. And I said, like I wanted to have a meeting. So he said, well, maybe you should make a bouillon pêcheur, like, which is, like a big fish soup.
Yeah.
And then just invite them over. And so I had our housekeeper make a beautiful bouillon pêcheur. I had never had a bouillon pêcheur in Haiti, so
Oh.
like my way. And so we just sat there and we talked about like what are your issues with what's going on environmentally. And I didn't know like how so deep into like, you know, the environment and their concerns. I didn't know like they had like all this concern about it, because I just, you know, like you
Right.
take it for granted, because if you don't ask, you don't know,
You're
right?
not a Fisher person.
Exactly. And then so they just sat there and they just like imparted like all this knowledge on me, and I was just like, okay, so what happens when a fisherman like disappears and goes away or dies at sea, whatever? And then they told me about like this ceremony. I said, well, we got to film it. And this was not like I had not like written. I know that, you know, like there would be some ceremony, but I didn't know what the ceremony was. I didn't know that it was a ceremony where you acted like you were on the boat, because you know when they're going like this and they're throwing the water out and it's like
Yes.
sending them. And so the person who led the ceremony is Jean Louis, you know, he's the one like who's singing, and he's like, leading it. He's the one who like repairs our thatch roof. So he does that, but he's also like a great fisherman too. But he's like stopped going to sea. But you know, and he has not aged. He's like that way since I had met him in 2003. So I knew him as well. And so everyone was just like, for you, anything. And so when we got like, you know, to do that day, you know, like where they all sat on the boat, it just was just like, it was just going like all over. We were doing a 2 camera, just trying to not be in each other's way. And they just ran with it
Oh,
because talking about like things that they
did
were
they
concerned.
ever?
Yeah.
Did they ever? You know,
Yeah.
it's such a powerful scene, and you know, I thought about all of the ways in which, you know, the dead are are making themselves known in your movie. They are calling themselves forward, and you're calling them forward, and absolutely, that was just this moment where it was like, you know, the sea and people's relationship to it was like evoking all the people lost, um, uh, and and yet with such tenderness. And I think the other thing that I will never forget is the scene where Joris is caressing the cow. Is also just this incredibly tactile, um, transportive experience, because you know not all of us like actually give animals their due respect like he was doing in that moment. He had a relationship, a long-standing relationship with this cow that was completely tangible, and you felt back and forth communication going on. Um, so
But
I
it's so
just
real, because you know we had the mic on him when we were like, because we're just like, okay, just you know you can go over there. And we were testing the mic, and we had not like started shooting, and then my sound person said, you may want to hear this. And so and he's having a conversation with Luco, and he's like, Luco, you know, like you're gonna behave, because your image is gonna go like very very far. Your image is going to go very very far, and you know they're making this movie and I'm in it and you're in it, and so your image is going to go very far, so you better behave.
Oh, and he was so right. That image has gone really far and it's
I was just
still
like,
going.
and for me, I didn't know, like I didn't, I just was just like, okay, let's do this thing, because we see Luco in the beginning, and we'd see Luco like without his, you know, his mama
Yeah.
basically. And so he's telling Luca about like your mama's gone now, but you know, like you're gonna grow on to be like a huge, and so and he actually does talk to his cow.
Yes, he
And I
does.
kind of like,
It
and I
was
was
it
like, can
was
we do
very
this scene?
clear.
Yeah, I said, could we do this scene? And it didn't sound like far-fetched at all.
No.
And so it just so happens that he does talk to this cow, and this talk that, and they have like that relationship that you say. And so it was just like, it was, when we talk about, like, I want to bring the magic of cinema in, since we're talking about that, is there are things that I projected, that I hoped for, and didn't know how I was going to get them, right? But I said, well, if I can project it, if I can feel it and see it, then it can exist, right? And so when we go to Cap Rouge, like the part where we look for the cemetery of like where people are buried, in Cap Rouge, and it's the most beautiful place for me in Haiti. I mean, and it's called Cap Rouge because the dirt is like red, 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 right? And and so we were supposed to go and scout. I had scouted like before I know the place. I mean, I knew what I wanted, but And we were supposed to go and scout a little bit while we were shooting and then go back. And then my line producer told me, he said, listen, you don't have time in the schedule to do that. So we should go early morning, and whoever we find, we'll just like, like work with the people that we find there. And like, I mean, I can't do that on a big budget, like we'll go there and like whoever we find, we'll bring them in. Right. So this is what, like, when you say, going rogue has also its own kind of like, freedom, and to be able to say, yeah, let me just like open myself up to what the universe will give me. Right. And so that whole like spirituality aspect of when we make films, that we allow ourselves to like go towards the unknown and trust that the unknown has our back. Right. So that was it. So we go up there like early morning, and so we scout, and we found a couple of people, and so I would give them the lines and everything, and they would like say, okay, we get this, but they've never like been in a movie before. And so we shoot that scene of like, people going, well, like she's asking, like, where's the home of so-and-so, where so-and-so buried, and people don't know. And then the woman who says, these are not my lines, the woman who says, pays en grand, it's a big country, it could be there, it could be there. And I was just like, I would have never gotten this if I had written this down.
That's
Right.
right.
I
That's
just
right.
trust the unknown. Right. Pays en grand. And the way she says it, and she's so glamorous, and I'm just like looking at her, the way she's dressed, I was like, I couldn't even like come up with what she was wearing, because it's just like, so like, it makes total sense. Right. And so at some point, the last scene was supposed to like, she's supposed to find, an older gentleman who actually walks her there. Right. So we go to this man, we see him, and he's like, planning things and stuff like that. So we go to him and we say, well, like, we're making a movie. Do you mind, playing in the scene? We could, like, we can compensate you, and so on and so forth. And he looks at us and he says, I don't know these people you're talking about. And we're like, yeah, it's for a movie. It's pretend. Okay. She's going to come up to you and she's going to ask you for these people. And you just say, they're, you don't know them, or they're there, or whatever. And he's like, okay. So we go. So I say, all right, action. So Anicia goes and speaks to him and stuff. And he turns around and says, I told you I don't know these people. So we're like, okay. So we all start laughing, right? And then at the end, we found out, and he says, you know what? He says, I don't know, but lies have consequences. If I say I know these people,
Oh,
and he's like,
that's
so
fantastic.
he had never seen a movie, so he doesn't, like,
Mm,
lies
mm,
have consequences, right?
mm.
So we're like, okay, we get that. We're not gonna force you. All right. So I'm like, okay, we won't shoot it. You'll just go to the graveyard by yourself. I don't have like the old man. We're losing the son. It's okay. We'll work with what we got, right? So I go, okay, action. And so Anicia's like going on her own. And then I hear in the back, like a man's voice going, blanc, blanc, like to Hervé, my grand goût. And I turn around and I'm like, and then I do a double take. Kirsten, I swear to you, this is the man, the way that I described him in my script. I don't know where he came from. He has like, this is like the dirt there is red. I mean, like, I had to wash for like 2 days, like the dirt off of my feet, right? This guy has a pristine white hat.
Oh,
He's got a staff. I actually literally wrote this. He has a staff.
uh,
He's wearing his shirt. He's like dignified and everything. And I go, stop. And I
mm.
turn around to him. I says, where are you going? He goes, oh, I was just gonna go there and have, some drinks with friends. I didn't even see where he came from, right?
Oh,
And so I said, can you do me a favor? And he said, sure. I said, well, like, this young lady here is looking for the grave of her family, and she's going to ask you a few questions. This is for a movie. He's like, okay, whatever you want. All
yeah.
right. And so I said, all you have to say is say, it's all one family, your family. That's all. He's like, that's all. I was like, yeah. And he says, okay, no problem. We go, action. He gets the line. I mean, we did it 3 times. He never missed a beat, right?
Mm.
And so at some point I said, okay. And so when we get there, he took it so seriously, because when your people go to visit your people and they're not your people, you give them the space. So he just turned his back. Like, like as though he was living like the situation and it's not for a movie. So he just did everything that he would do, right? So he turns his back to give her the privacy. And so when she asks, where are the people's name? And he takes his staff and he just hits it across the thing. And I never asked him to do that. And so, and he says, it's all one family, your family. And then he walks away and he says it one more time because the line stayed with him. I didn't ask him to say that. When he leaves and he says, just it's all one family, your family. It's almost kind of like we gave each other a gift. I gave him a line and he gave me, himself, because that's what he walked away with. With that,
Oh,
with that
oh,
line.
I mean, I love seeing that man in the movie. I love that scene, but now I love it even more, I have to say. I mean, this thing that you're talking about, this, sort of ineffable, like, where did he come from? He came both from your imagination and from the place. And because of what the world that you created, Guetty, and I think this is like important for all of us. It's like trust is how we make movies, and you had built out of several years of being in that place. You built relationships of trust that then you could rely upon in these moments when it was like, we're doing this. No, wait, we're going to do this. We're going to let this man walk into the shot. And that's both trust with your crew
Mm-hmm.
as well as trust with the place. And that's the way that it's possible to have the kind of flexibility that you're talking about, because so much of the film you comes from your documentary chops, right? Like you and Hervé as a camera person have spent a lot of time making documentaries, and you understand how to let things be as
Mm-hmm.
they are and know that there will be great meaning in things that, you don't see coming. But obviously you have to set up other things. You have to, be there with your camera at the right time of light. But this kind of improvisational capacity is more nurtured in the documentary world, I would say.
Completely.
And yet it was critically necessary for this film because you were relying on the sun. You, you didn't always have electricity. You were relying on people who had never even seen a movie before, so didn't know how to act, right?
Exactly.
So I just think it's such a testimony to the improvisational capacity that comes out of documentary work. And I'm curious, did you ever have a moment when you were like the things that you wished to make happen when they couldn't happen? That kind of how did you manage your frustration, and how did you sort of do these jujitsu moves that you're talking about, where you like turned it into another thing? Is that deep in you at this point as a filmmaker? Did this film push you into new territory around that? Because I feel like for me this film is like a leap forward into unknown space for you. It's a very
Completely.
brave film.
Completely. Thank you. I think having done documentaries and observing people, it's definitely informed my own sensibility as well in terms of um, forming relationships while making the film, the relationships with the team, the relationship with your subjects, right? And so for me, the to allow oneself to be completely malleable as well, to allow oneself to trust and to allow oneself to be a vessel, to say, okay, this is where I am, this is what I need, I'm just putting myself out there and I'm ready to receive. Like, I know it sounds like a little bit like woo stuff what I'm talking about, but I do come from a place where I had to do a lot of unlearning of like cinematic language, in the traditional way, to say, how do I make a film that resemble the people that I'm filming, resemble their own very non-Cartesian way of like seeing the world and thinking and analyzing. And that for me was the I can say the biggest struggle. But in terms of frustration, I bring them on. the obstacles turn into like, challenges, and they make me like so much better each time, not like, I say bring them on like that, but what I mean is that, but I've always, done my films with like budgets that are way under what they should be done for. And for me, it's not like about like the money itself, but about the energy and the relationship that you develop with the people. And the fact that I always say that I want to work with my tribe, and what my tribe is, those are people that I love, who love me, who respect me, whom I care about, who can call me like at any time of the night and say, something's up. I get up and I'm there for you. Because I think when you have that, you have done like a huge part of like the filmmaking itself. The rest is, okay, okay, we got the light right, you guys, you setting it up, and like we all know how to do that. But do we really know how to be like entirely filmmakers? And I think you got to check yourself each time and say, what's motivating me to do this? Am I allowing myself, like the freedom to go into the unknown, as opposed to trying to stay in like a specific way of like making films? So I had to let go like a lot, but so I could receive 100-fold. And so I think for me, that's the relationship that I had with making this film. And I know that the next film I'm making, is like, different budget, cast, and all that kind of stuff. But as soon as I'm done with that, I want to go back to making a film that feels like, a little bit more organic to who I am as well, in the sense that I can just go and, like work at different times, not have like, like I got to shoot it for like these amount of days, but have something that's much more with, that resembles the place. Yeah. For me, that process was extremely liberating. And so, I mean, for me, when I speak to like the younger filmmakers that I mentor, I say it's not about the camera, it's not about like, it's not about like necessarily the funds. We do need funds, but it's what is it that you want to say that no one else has said before, and in ways that you have not seen before, but also that makes sense for where you are at, that makes sense for the film that you are making. Not like, don't try to do Martin Scorsese in Haiti. You don't have his money, you don't have like the same like angst, you don't have like, it's not, so what, like what do you make with what you have where you are? That's for me, where that film came from. It's like that deep desire to
Mm.
actually make the work. Then like other frustration and other things just come, and you deal with them because you were so driven to make it in the first place. You can't like be in a space of frustration constantly. You have to sort of like let go of all that and know
Mm.
that there will be problems, but you were so like equipped to handle them
Mm.
because you're not like frustrated. You
Yes.
see what I'm saying?
Yes, absolutely. I hear what you're saying, and the film, in some ways, um, offers that to us as the audience, because it challenges our own expectations of what's going to happen, what we're going to get, and changes our relationship to being in time. So that we just sort of settle down, and enter different moments in the film and stop worrying, what does this add up to, how does that fit with that. We just let it go, because suddenly we're in this moment of like wonder, pleasure, discovery, delight, like laughter. I mean, I laughed so hard, the free electricity sign, I like fell off my chair. um, I love the way you use music in the film too, Guetty. So there's the state of making the film in the place, and then there's the edit room and thinking about how you bring the musical palette to the movie. And that was just, I mean, there's so many things for us to talk about. I know that we're getting close to having to wrap it up, but there's so much pleasure in this film. It's just fun to like open up the suitcases. Like, I want to talk about the costume design, I want to talk about the music. Tell us a little bit about the music.
So the music for me was already like in my head. And so I know that I was like, making the film with this music, with the rhythm. And Layla McCalla, who is a Haitian singer songwriter, beautiful cello player, but she also plays the banjo. And she did music for my film, Broken Stones, my documentary. And she had just released that new album, which is like songs to traditional Haitian songs, but songs to Langston Hughes poems, and which was called Varied College Songs. And she like launched that album on Kickstarter, and I like sent money, like for her, and she just became a, like one of the projects we love. And she was trying to raise 5,000 and ways like, like 5 times more than that. And so I reached back out to her. Like I say, you work with your tribe and your people, and I love her voice. And it's just like, and also the some of the songs that she was singing are very traditional songs that sort of lull you. They're part of your childhood. So I wanted that palette to feel very, very Haitian. The little idiosyncrasies of being Haitian comes from like our music as well, and the traditional songs. There's also the song of Toto Bissant, that we use at the end, the Papa Loco song, which is a traditional Vodou song that speaks to those we have lost and where do they go after.
Yeah,
And
amazing.
so everything was like, it was very like meticulously, chosen. And I'm very much a detail oriented person. And so everything for me is like written and seen, like from the little flower in the hair of, of the muse in the beginning, those little details, those little things, and also the soundscape. Of course, a lot of the sea, and that gave us a lot of problem also doing the mix.
Yeah, I'm sure it
Um,
did.
to clean the sound, clean, because the sea is there. But at the same time, the sea is also a character of the film. It's so present for many reasons, for the way that it's encroaching on the earth, but for the way also that it carries us back to Guinea. Because in our tradition, in Vodou tradition, but in tradition of Haiti in general, and a lot of our tradition comes from Vodou, whether you're Vodouisan or not. We believe that, like when we die, our souls go back to Guinea, and Guinea's Africa. And so, and in the Vodou tradition, when you die, your soul goes underwater for a year and a day. And
Wow.
then, yeah, and then your people have to do a ceremony to allow for your soul to come back. And that soul goes and lives like in the trees, in the grottos, in different places, like a
What's
what
the
was
extra day for? What's the extra day for, do you
I don't know what
suppose?
the extra day is for.
I
Like,
know.
I don't know what
I
the
love it's sort of asymmetry,
extra day. Yeah,
right? It's things in their
yeah,
place but out of their place at the
yeah,
same time, right?
completely,
Yeah.
completely. And so for me, in knowing that, as well as when you talk about like the film starting underwater, it's like that womb place, but it's also the
Mhm.
place where the spirits exist, those who are about to go, those who are coming
Yeah.
back, and how they
Yeah.
flow in and flow out. What they meet in the middle, there's a middle passage of like those who are going and those who are coming back. So that meant, a lot for me, to start from there. And so the music also that was going to like accompany us back, to bring us back, was the Papa Loco song. So that when it was edited, when we did that, because I edited in Haiti, because I just didn't want to be separated from the place when I was editing. Also, I wanted to, if there's anything that I needed to capture, because at that same time, there are lots of things that are happening at that moment in Haiti. There's those strikes, teachers are on strike. There's like the students are on strike because they're not paying the teachers. There's like corruption. There's like a lot of things that are happening. And I said, what if this film could also exist, like as I am editing, I'm going to grab some stuff that's going to be part of it, because I feel like right now I need that stuff. Right. Because you see how, like, when you change, like, while, and documentary allows us to do that. And that's where, like also the
That's
path
right.
of, being a documentary filmmaker, where you're like, I need a little bit of this. I need a little bit of that.
Yeah.
Use
And
that,
it's
as
yeah.
part of the narrative. And so some of this stuff was like shot while I was editing. So that last scene, and I didn't think about the last scene when I wrote the script like that. And
Mhm.
it's while I was editing, and there was all these bodies that were coming back from, like, the Mediterranean, like African bodies that were like trying to leave Africa, and they were coming back. and and I, like you'd see like shoes or like in carte d'identité, like a photo or something, and possessions, and that's all that was left in those bodies. And I was like, I want my film to be connected to all those people who have made those passages, those who have succeeded and those who haven't, and like all from the middle passage, from the time of slavery all the way to today, because that passage is still the same, right? And so that scene was shot while I was editing, when we,
Mm.
to get the clothes like out of like,
Yeah.
um yeah.
And
So
it does resonate with all of those levels. I mean, it's so beautiful what you've added today. So many of us have one understanding of what the middle passage is, but now you've added this idea of people who get to live their lives, but then re-enter the sea and are crossing, going headed back home.
yeah,
It's just,
yeah, yeah,
so extraordinary. I'm
yeah.
so that I'm like filled with that, but already, even without words, that's in your movie, and it's in those clothes on the shore and those clothes underwater, which are just indelible images. They're unforgettable images, and they resonate so powerfully. Um, Guetty, you know, I just because I'm greedy. I'm just
I'm just
I
letting
mean
you guys
I'm just
do.
because I'm thinking about the clothes we wear, right? The clothes we wear, and the visual signals that we give out into the world, some of which we control, some of which we do not control, right? Um, in this movie, I felt like clothes were speaking like the story of the entire planet in some kind of way, and I'm looking at us, I'm looking at this painting, and how like visual language can speak in multiple ways simultaneously. Um, do you think this is part of why cinema is so important to you? Because as long as I've ever known you, which is a good long time now,
I know, right?
your desire to be
Hold on one second.
making
Let me just
cinema,
get this phone.
she's got to jump. It's only to show us how fabulous is her jacket, is what's happening. But yeah, so just, I mean, that desire for cinema, which is image, color, sound, words, humans, landscape. Um, you you are so many places now. You've lived so many lives, but this desire for cinema has been really profound in you ever since I've known you, since I first met you in France. Do you understand it? What it's connected to? How you figured out that cinema was your language?
I figured it out like ever since I was tiny, because I mean I grew up in, in Haiti during the dictatorship, and cinema was like a sanctuary for us, right? And it was also, yeah, we could go to the drive-ins with, with our parents, right? And so if depending on our report card, and so every
Ah.
Friday or every other Friday, so I wasn't like an A student, because for me it was like the space where things, because your parents try to protect you, you live in a totalitarian state, right? Because
Mm.
because there's the codes, or you're always trying to crack something and trying to figure it out, right? And so you kind of like, you're looking at your parents, and you sense that they're juggling, and they're trying to like, but they're trying to make you happy at the same time, and keep you, as a child, and filled your world with colors, and things, and carnival, and all those, these great things that, like, that you could fill a child's world with, without them like worrying about it. But except I wasn't that kind of a child, that, like, I was also, like, besides the colors and the great things and the
You were
toys
paying
and stuff,
attention.
I was paying attention. I was like, like, like I was born, like I came out, like my eyes were wide open, and it was just like, okay, like, all right. all right, let me see what's happening here, and but then I would understand, later, that because I found out that I was born after a child who had passed away.
Mm.
So I always felt like I had, in some strange way, that I was living for two.
Oh.
And but never knew, but didn't find out until later that I followed a child. But I always felt like, that I
Mm.
was living for two.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so for me, my relationship with cinema is not just, I know some people say, yeah, like, your film choose you, da da da, and all that kind of stuff, and sounds trite. But it's like it did choose me, because it's my relationship with the other that I've always had since I was little, that I was like always living for two. So when we would go and see these films, they were like our spaces of like where we were protected. And when we couldn't see them, I asked my parents, can we like do cinema in the backyard? So I had my mother make us like this like screen, like with like this white fabric. And my father used to like, when he would come back, because he was working in the United States, and so he like welding was his hobby. So they welded these two posts. And so, because I thought about it, like if it rained, then we could like roll them in. So I designed this. And so we created like, like this theater, like in our backyard. And we even had like play money that, people came,
Uh,
like the tickets and stuff like that. And so we would recreate the films that we'd see, like the Westerns or whatever. And, but there was always a feeling of like, there was always a feeling of like whatever was going on screen was happening. I was having like my own relationship with it.
mm.
It's like, Godard says, like the film does not exist only on the screen, but it's in that middle place where you're having that conversation. But I felt that early on, and then you would read it and you would hear, oh, he says that. I was like, and you're like, I knew that,
Ah, you
but
sure
I just,
did.
but I just couldn't put it into words, But it was always that other like kind of like that conversation that, that whatever's happening there is having a conversation with me, and I'm having a conversation. And so and of course, when I decided to make films, it was really, I don't even think it was a decision. It just like felt like just like something very seamless. Like, this has to be who I am. This has to be part of my life. This has to be what I was put here to do, not just for me, but for that other person that I was living for too.
Mm.
And so that was that. And that's the weight of it also for me. It's like there is a sense of like purpose in it. And there's a sense of, also because I did, shift my lenses to Haiti, uh uh like right after the quake, because prior to that I was not making films about Haiti, but I was writing films to make about Haiti, which is the one that, we went to Haiti together to scout. But and it would and it became, the purpose became, how do I continue to create that conversation, in a place where we are these perpetual others? And that's why I chose fiction for Ayiti Mon Amour and not documentary, because the documentary formed for that specific time, like after the earthquake, 5 years after the earthquake, where there was like, where we were bombarded with a plethora of images that were just like, I mean, they served their purposes, but at the same time, they were brutal, because there were these bodies, these bloated bodies, and we don't see, white bodies like that, and people do take the time to actually, blow up, those images, and that's all you see. And Haiti today, if you go on Google and you try to find anything about Haiti, it's like the Haiti before the quake did not exist. And so with that kind of like, very like myopic way of looking at this space that I come from, that I love, that is giving me so much, um, it behooves me to create different images, that allow us to be in conversation in a place of decency, in a place of mutual understanding, where I'm not your perpetual other in, subject in a documentary film that you're looking from like the outside. So the desire to bring people like really in was the only form that I could find to actually speak of this quake 5 years later, but through different images, you know?
You
And
did it. You did it. You did it.
so really, when you ask like the importance of like using cinema, I feel like I will end with like the quote of Agnès Varda, who I had the pleasure of meeting in Toronto when my film premiered there. She said to me, she said, we sat down and we had coffee because it was an event in her honor, and of course, like everyone wanted like her attention and everything. And so I came up to her. She says, "Do you like dessert?" I was like,
Yes.
yeah. She was like, "I love dessert." And so, "Do you want to sit with me and have some dessert? And we'll have some coffee." So she called over some coffee because everyone was talking to her and she didn't have time to like, even finish her meal or whatever. And so she got all of her dessert and everything. And we're talking about like her films. And I, and we talked about my film. And she said to me, she said, it's extremely important to make films where you come from because cinema is permanent and news is ephemeral. You don't go back to news to know a place, but you go back to a film. And the relationship that you have with a film is constantly changing depending on, like what, where you are in the world, or what you're feeling, what you're going through. Your relationship is constantly changing. So it's something that's constantly, breathing and living. Once you've done it, it's got its own life. And so that whole idea of like Haiti being in the news all the time and that ephemerality of it, of like, okay, it's in the news, it's a blitz, and then we forget it. It's like, I don't want to be forgotten. And
Yes.
so, I make cinema.
Yes, you do. Keep doing it. This has been such a gift. I feel like you've shared so much with me and with everyone listening, the back and forth that's intrinsic to the way you live and the way you make cinema. You already gave us the gift of the movie, but it's just been such a joy to talk to you, Guetty. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, KJ. Thank you for doing this. I can't wait to see you in person again.
Hey, but I like seeing your image, I gotta say. You're bringing me a lot of joy just through this screen.
Yes,
um,
indeed.
Sherry Bonbon, we'll call it a wrap.
Yes, let's
How
call
do
it.
we say, how would you say goodbye and you'd see me again in Creole?
We say au revoir, which is very French, but we say nawe pita, that we'll see each other later. Nawe pita.
Nawepita.
Okay.
All right.
Bye, darling. Thank you for
Love
doing.
you.
Love
Bye.
you.